What's up, you guys? It's Graham here. So let's cover something that continues to get brought up here on the channel, especially recently after some of my income breakdown videos, and that is the fact that I actively try to borrow as much money as I possibly can to go and invest with and buy real estate with. Like, ideally, I want to spend as little of my own money out of pocket as possible, and I don't make any effort whatsoever to try to pay down any of my current mortgages more than I absolutely need to. Now, some people get it and understand the bigger picture of what I'm doing, but anytime my videos get pushed out to an audience that isn't familiar with the concepts of investing, or more specifically investing in real estate, I end up getting a rather intense reaction that I'm setting myself up for bankruptcy, or I must have forgotten what had happened in 2008, or I should go and read up on Dave Ramsey, who took out loans to buy real estate and then lost everything and filed for bankruptcy. But I gotta say, even with all that in mind, my reasoning for trying to borrow as much money as I possibly can is a little bit less complex than people make it out to be. And really, for me, borrowing money makes the most logical sense, not only in terms of profitability, but also in terms of safety. As in, borrowing money for me is a lot safer of an investment than me going out and buying things and owning them outright in cash. So let's go over my investment philosophy behind borrowing money and how you could use that to make way more profit, how that could be a safer investment than going and paying for something outright in cash, and also how I'm able to get money for essentially absolutely free, and I'm going to break down exactly how that works. And if you still don't believe me, I'm going to do my best to change your mind by the end of the video, and also try to get you to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. It helps out my channel tremendously, so if you wouldn't mind doing that, would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much, and let's get into the video. At first, I think it's really important to understand the nuances of debt and borrowing money, and make the distinction that not all debt should be automatically categorized as being bad. I think most people hear debt and they envision this $35,000 credit card bill for lavish vacations, or going and buying the newest tech gadgets where credit card companies just rake in thousands of dollars of profit from you in their absurd interest charges. Or they think of someone living drastically above their means, buying things they can't afford, and otherwise building a house of cards that could come tumbling down at any minute. But I see debt as something completely different. To me, I view it as a tool, just like anything else that you could use to build your wealth if you know how to use it correctly. And to me, debt should only be used if you know what you're doing, you use it strategically, and you use it towards something that makes you money. And that's the key word here, is makes you money. If having debt does not make you money, then I think it's safe to automatically assume that debt is bad. Stuff like that might include credit card debt, taking out a personal loan to buy things you don't need, getting too big of a mortgage that stretches yourself too thin financially. Stuff like that will not make you any more money. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with going and buying things you don't need, although it does mean that I will roast you on my second channel, The Graham Stephan Show, but it's okay as long as you can afford to buy those things outright in cash. That way, you're not going to be forced to pay any additional interest on top of something that is already an expense to begin with. But on the other hand, if you do use debt correctly, you're going to be going on to one of the main reasons why I love to borrow as much money as I can, and that would be leverage. This is when you borrow money in order to invest, and ideally that investment makes you more money than what you owe back in interest on that loan. For example, imagine borrowing $100,000 from a bank, and the bank says you have to pay them back with a 4% interest rate, or $4,000 per year. But you know you could invest that $100,000 to buy a small house that might make you $12,000 a year in profit, or a 12% return. That means you've just paid $4,000 in interest to make $12,000, meaning you've just walked away with $8,000 in profit without using any of your own money. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would a bank ever agree to loan money at 4% when they can just go and invest that money themselves to get a much higher return? And that is a good question with a very complicated answer. But really, to sum things up, banks are in the business of what's called risk management, and loaning out money is generally a lot safer than going and investing it. So banks will loan out money to its customers and then turn around and sell those loans to other institutions for a nearly risk-free quick profit. But banks also enjoy this type of leverage as well, because they don't need to have $100,000 in order to lend $100,000 to you. In fact, with the term known as fractional reserve banking, banks can lend out up to 10 times the money they have on hand and are only required to keep about 10% in cash at any given time. So if a bank has $10,000, then theoretically they can give you up to a $100,000 loan. And then that bank can turn around and sell that loan to someone else who will hold it until maturity, making a very quick, tidy profit. profit. So banks are earning money from this, and then you get the ability to go and use that money towards actively managed investments that will get you a much higher return. Now here's why borrowing money makes way more sense for me and exactly why I do it. Now when it comes to real estate, you have two ways to buy a property. Number one is buying it in cash and owning it outright, and the second is what most people do, and that is to borrow money and take out a loan to buy real estate and get what's called a mortgage. And by going and taking out a loan on the property, you can end up making way more money than you could otherwise. And here's an example. Let's just say you go and buy a $100,000 home and you paid for it outright with $100,000 in cash that you've saved up for. Now you don't owe any money on that house. Then we'll assume that house brings in $10,000 a year in profit with rental income. That means this property is making you $10,000 from a $100,000 investment, which works out to be a 10% return on your money, and that is known as what's called a cash-on-cash return. However, now I'm going to be showing you what borrowing money does to these returns. In this scenario, you buy the same $100,000 house, except instead of paying for it outright in cash, you put $33,000 down as a down payment, and then you get a loan for the rest, meaning you now have a mortgage for $67,000. Now, to keep things simple, let's just say that loan costs you 5% a year, which works out to be $3,350 annually. Now, this property still makes you the same $10,000 a year, except now you have to pay $3,350 towards your mortgage, leaving you with $6,650 a year in profit. However, as you can start to see here, you only invested $33,000 in order to make $6,650 a year, which works out to be a 20% cash-on-cash return from the money you invested. That means you've literally doubled your return investing in real estate by getting a loan, going into debt, and leveraging your money. Not only that, but if you have $100,000 saved up, this means you have the money to go and spend $33,000 3 times on 3 different down payments to buy 3 rental properties that all do these exact same numbers instead of going and buying one property outright in cash. Now, when it comes to doing this, it's really important to understand that not all loans are good and not every property makes sense to buy. So I'm very careful about the loans I do take out because I don't want to get in over my head or have any chance of losing money. So for myself, personally, I will only take out 30-year fixed-rate loans with a low interest rate. That means my loan payment doesn't change and is fixed for the next 30 years, so I have the exact same loan payment on year 29 as I do today. That means I could better predict my cash flow, I'm not going to be hit with any surprises, and there's no chance of the bank ever asking for all the money back on short notice, regardless of what happens with the economy. Then, after 30 years of making payments, I'll own it outright, I won't have any more loan on it, and anything else I make will be 100% profit. Now, in addition to that, the interest I pay on those 30-year fixed-rate mortgages just becomes a tax write-off against the rental income I receive, helping me owe just a little bit less in tax, and here's how that works. If I'm paying 3.5% interest on a $100,000 loan, that means $3,500 per year is going towards interest to the bank. And according to the IRS, that $3,500 is seen as a business expense. That saves me a lot of money on my taxes, considering now that my top-end tax bracket is over 50% between federal and state income tax, which is a lot. So effectively, a $3,500 tax write-off saves me $1,750 in taxes. That's also another major reason why, for many people, they prefer to keep a mortgage on a property rather than try to pay it off early. Because without that tax write-off, I would pay way more in taxes with zero upside. So effectively, me taking out a 3.5% mortgage is like, after taxes, I'm only paying half that, or 1.75%, fixed for 30 years, which is really, really low. Like, savings accounts will pay more than that. But it doesn't stop quite there, because when you take out a long-term loan, you also need to consider the power of inflation. This is what happens when more money gets printed into our economy, and the more money that gets printed, the less our money is worth. It's almost like cutting an $8 pizza into 4 slices, and each of those slices is worth $2. But if you cut that same pizza into 5 slices, well, it's still an $8 pizza, but now every single slice is worth $1.60 because you get now a little bit less. The exact same thing applies to your money, and the more the government prints money, the more it's like cutting a pizza into smaller and smaller slices. And for the most part, the Federal Reserve tries to keep inflation hovering about 2% annually, which means that $1 you have today is going to have the value or purchasing power of 98 cents a year from now. Or in other words, you'll need $1.02 next year to buy what $1 can get you today. Now, all of this might sound really annoying and just disheartening to hear this, but if you invest in real estate, you can use this to your advantage. As a really simple example, let's just say you have a $100,000 mortgage and the bank tells you that you're going to have to pay back that loan in full 30 years from today. Now that might seem like a lot of money, but because I'm borrowing $100,000 in today's money and then paying it back with $100,000 worth of future money, that $100,000 is not going to cost me as much as I think because it's not adjusted to inflation. Meaning that $100,000 in the year 2050 will be worth what $46,511 is today. That's almost like someone telling you, I'm going to give you $100,000 and all you got to do is pay me back $46,511 in the future. Anyone would do it. That's a no-brainer. So that is exactly why I do it. This is also how I'm effectively able to borrow money for completely free, meaning it's cheaper for me to borrow money than it is to pay for something outright. And if that sounds like science fiction or like a scam or anything like that, here's how I'm able to do it. First, I'm getting a low-interest, fixed-rate 30-year loan. My average interest rate between the 3 mortgages I currently have is 3.52% on about $1.7 million. When you consider that the interest rate I pay is a tax write-off against the rental income I receive, it's effectively like I'm only paying half of that after taxes, or 1.76% in interest, net out of pocket at the end of the day. Then that amount is also lowered by inflation, because every year my outstanding loan balance becomes easier to pay off with future money that's worth less. Like if you go and look this year that inflation was 1.76%. That means when you factor in inflation and tax write-offs, it's like I'm getting loaned money for 30 years for completely free adjusted for inflation. Not to mention, it's likely that there will be years where inflation is above 1.76%, where in a way, it's almost as though the banks will be paying me to borrow money from them to go and invest back into real estate. So in this case, it makes absolutely no sense for me to try to pay off these loans early, because if I did, I would be losing money, not to mention a few other major disadvantages. First, if I paid for any of my properties outright, or I decided to go and pay off the current mortgages that I have, I would be tying up a lot of money in one place. Meaning I couldn't use that towards any other investments out there, and that's what's known as an opportunity cost. That is when you have the opportunity to go and invest your money somewhere else that's maybe a better option, but you can't because either your money is tied up or you don't have access to it. Like imagine locking up $1,000 in a CD right now that's earning 2% interest. Your opportunity cost might be the 8% you could have otherwise made if you invested that money in the stock market. The same also applies to real estate. With real estate, I would essentially just be locking up that money to get a 3.5% return, which, by the way, like I mentioned, is free after tax write-offs and inflation. And doing all of that to forego using that same money to invest somewhere else for a 5 to 10% return. That means if I went to pay off the mortgages, I would actually lose money than if I kept the money in cash and invested it somewhere else. The second, by borrowing money, as odd as this is to say, I'm able to better diversify my investments, allowing me a safer spread of my money. For example, instead of tying up all $1 million in one property, I could decide to tie up $250,000 in one property and then spend the other $750,000 buying 3 other properties in different areas. That way, I don't have all of my eggs in one basket, and if one of those properties does poorly, it doesn't make as much of a difference because I have 3 others that are doing well. And that applies to pretty much any investment out there. Like I could spend that $750,000 on stocks, on bonds, on index funds, and a variety of other things, all which would give me a lot more diversification than sticking all of it in one single property and having that be a make or break it. So almost in a way, borrowing money can give you a lot more safety and liquidity just in the event you need the money or have a better opportunity available to you. Now, I do think there are some advantages of paying with cash and not having a mortgage, and I think these are worth mentioning here in the video just so I have a balanced perspective. Like first, when you pay cash for something, you have a lot less risk. You're not going to have to worry about having high overhead or a property not cash flowing or not being able to make a mortgage payment, because pretty much everything you do at that point is going to be profit. Like pretty much any property is going to cash flow when you don't have a mortgage on it. So there's a lot less risk in the event you have a vacancy or a big expense comes up or anything else that comes up that eats into your profit. The second, when you own something outright, you have a lot more peace of mind. I do admit there is something to be said about owning something outright and not having to make any payments on it. It just means you're going to have a safer, more predictable return. You're not going to have to worry about making mortgage payments. Everything you make is profit. Whenever you sell the property, you get whatever it's worth back in your pocket. And really being that carefree can lighten up everything else in your life. And for that, I could definitely see the mental appeal, and something like that is going to be worth a different amount for different people. And third, paying for something outright in cash is really easy. You don't have to get approved for a mortgage. There are no loan processing fees. You don't owe any interest. There is no appraisal. You can close as quickly as you want and there are no complications. It's really as easy as just initiating a wire transfer and you're done. Compare that to getting a mortgage, which could be quite a hectic process and sometimes take upwards of 30 days. Sometimes you could also be more aggressive with your offer because you can close so quickly, which means that potentially you can negotiate a lower price if you're a cash offer. But overall, having done both, I bought properties outright in cash and I've also bought properties with a mortgage. I gotta say, I will take the mortgage option every single time. At this point, with rates as low as they are and tax deductions as valuable as they are, it just makes the most financial sense for me to borrow money instead of tying up my own capital in one asset and not really putting it to its best use. Not only am I effectively just getting free money, but I'm better able to diversify my investments. I'm able to invest in other areas that yield a higher return than what I'm paying out in a loan, and I have more capital available to me to jump on other opportunities when they come up. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should go out and try to get as many loans as possible for the sake of getting loans, but for certain situations with certain investments, if the numbers make sense, it can be really advantageous when you fully understand what you're doing and take smart, calculated risks with long-term fixed-rate mortgages and only take on debt that makes you money, or in other words, just don't be stupid. Don't be reckless, don't be greedy, and don't borrow more money than you feel comfortable paying back. Play it safe, take it slow, continue learning, and never forget to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. So with that said, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As always, if you have not already destroyed the subscribe button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so YouTube notifies you anytime I post a video. Also, feel free to add me on Instagram. I post it pretty much daily, so if you want to be a part of it there, feel free to add me there. Also, feel free to add me on my second channel. That is the Graham Stephan Show. I post there every single day. I'm not posting here, so if you want to see a brand new video from me every single day, feel free to add yourself to that. And lastly, Webull is holding a promotion for the month of December. They will give you 2 free stocks when you deposit $100 on their platform, and one of those stocks is going to be valued up to $1,400. So if you want that, use the link down below in the description. Get your 2 free stocks. You may as well see if you'll get something up to $1,400, and if you do, congratulations. Let me know what you get. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.